In fall of 1991, I came to the University of Arkansas. I carried with me a lot of baggage from my traumatic childhood, including living with four different families, a season of homelessness, an abusive stepdad, as well as a lot of hunger. My goal, leave it all behind. My first roommate was an African American young woman from Little Rock, and we learned a ton about one another's culture, including what color underwear does your mom teach you how to wear when you're wearing white pants. My stepdad thought he would be helpful and exert his influence by telling me I shouldn't have to live with one of them, someone from a different race. I thought that because I loved my roommate and her friends, that meant that I wasn't like my stepdad and others. And I didn't see that while I was numbing my own pain with too much alcohol, that I was really ignoring other people's pain. Fast forward to 2017, and I published my book, Sharing My Story, where I talked about being a client of the Salvation Army. My kids were grown, I'd owned my own business, and I decided that it was a good idea to use my story to help people and became a fierce advocate for homelessness in my community. In July of 2018, I attended a Built for Zero homeless conference in Detroit. This is the first time I ever heard the term systemic racism. Quite frankly, it was overwhelming to imagine that there were systems and policies and procedures in government designed to continue to promote whites as better than other races. I left Detroit feeling like systemic racism was too big and too hard, and that ending homelessness in my community was actually very manageable. I didn't think of this as privilege at the time. I just simply thought I was choosing a different way to help my community. However, within a few months, I was selected to be the executive director for the Fayetteville Housing Authority, and it was a mess. We spent many months just trying to establish basic respect for our residents. I just wanted to do a good job, and so did the staff that I recruited. We didn't think of ourselves as people who were perpetuating systemic racism. We thought we were just following the rules. We didn't really have time to zoom out and look at our work from a generational or an equity standpoint because our job just seemed so freaking hard. I remember my first NARO conference when I sat in on the DEI roundtable on Saturday morning and finally felt like this was something that people were actually addressing the issues of equity in housing. In Detroit, it felt overwhelming. But finally, this was something I could do. And that fall at our NARO conference, I asked the DEI committee to teach me how to wrap my brain around systemic racism because I had no lived experience. Each month on the DEI committee, I began to see how we as housers did have a choice in the areas that we could be more flexible. I began to see how something as simple as a background check, which I thought of as protecting our residents from danger, actually had some very adverse effects. I have no idea why I hadn't connected the dots. I'd read the studies that talked about that people of color receive harsher sentences than the same crimes by white individuals. I knew that my friend at the U of A had to counsel his young athletes when they got here to be aware of DWB, driving while black, and that they were more likely to be pulled over than their white teammates. But I'd never put it together that somebody that had more involvement in the justice system might not be more dangerous. They might just be a person of color. My interest in policy and how we could make change in our society was piqued to the point that I became the policy subcommittee chair for DEI. After several months of discussion with people on our committee, those that had far more knowledge and experience than I did, I reported to the DEI committee that we had two policy recommendations that we thought were doable. Honestly, I can't tell you what those two are because Liz said to me, "We didn't choose you to lead a policy discussion for a doable policy initiative. It's time for bold leadership." As I come back through the discussions our committee had had, and I thought of our residents and how is their life harder than it needed to be, I set out a policy equity framework that addressed current issues with housing, as well as looking at root causes like education, criminal justice reform, and access to healthcare and healthy food. I don't know about you guys, but I want to live in a world where anyone, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, or anything has the same opportunities I did to overcome the cycle of poverty. I believe in a country that can right its wrongs and create equity that will become the new legacy and will allow everyone to live successful lives on their definition. I don't think your zip code should determine your health outcomes, and I don't think the color of your skin should limit your wealth outcomes. Perhaps in your community, you don't have a lot of racial diversity, so you think the equity policy framework is not for you. My question is, who is disadvantaged in your community? Is it people with disabilities? Is it migrant workers? Perhaps it's the elderly. Every community has someone who is their other. Those are our clients, and we have an opportunity to be their voice. When you have time after this conference to review the equity policy framework, I want you to think about what you can do. Where can you make an impact? Can you use this moment to imagine a future for the children of our current residents that's different and more equitable? The policies that establish housing authorities were created in the 1940s, and Einstein has famously said that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we use to create them. This work may feel very hard and very overwhelming, but like water on concrete, if we unite, one drop and one drop added over and over, we will break through the concrete. I hope you will consider the equity policy framework and how you can implement it in your local community with the vision that Liz gave the policy subcommittee. It's time for bold leadership. Thank you.